I don't think you're the parent from hell. I think you're great.
Thank you, Steve Zimmer, on the record.
And let me say that we have a lot of great schools in our district. A lot of schools that are struggling, and a lot of schools that need to get from struggling to good and then good to great. But now having done, I've spent, all I know is schools. I spent my entire adult life in LAUSD as a teacher, counselor, and now an activist, and now a board member. And the one thing that we have some really amazing teachers, we have some really amazing school leaders. But to Sarah's point, the tipping point is parent engagement. That is the tipping point. That is what moves schools. And the minute you walk onto any campus, is that a campus where the parents are engaged? And again, to Sarah's point, I don't mean like engaged in volunteering. Volunteering is important, that's great. But the schools that are thriving have parents that are engaged in every part, and I should say parents and families. It's not always just parents, it's grandparents, it's non-traditional families. Where families are engaged, schools are thriving. And sometimes that thriving isn't immediately producing the results that we want, but I know that it's going to happen. It's a feeling that you get when you walk onto a campus. And we really do have, I'm really incredibly proud to represent Mar Vista. And to Marco's point about choice, and there are things that Marco and I disagree about, but one thing that we agree about is the importance of that choice and the commitment that I've made to families in Mar Vista and in Venice is the literal making sure that the literal definition of that choice is true for every family, from pre-K through graduation or adult school, meaning that that it is important to have dynamic and interesting charters and highly achieving charters on the ground here in Mar Vista and Venice and Westchester. But when choice is real, it means that the powerful instructional programs in our neighborhood schools are viable choices for every family. And that is what we work on literally with Gay and with folks like James and with some of the outstanding school leaders that are in this room 24/7 every day. I want to talk more about that when we get into the questions and answers, but it would not be right for me to sit here and not address the crisis for a moment. The crisis is very real. You don't need me to tell you that. And it is really, just to take it to a different level, it is a crime against our children. And what is happening in terms of funding and conversations about reform are essential. But the reforms that all of us want can't happen unless there's a baseline of funding in this district and in the state. Make no mistake about it, our children are being held hostage. Their dreams, their hopes, their futures are being held hostage by a small group of ideologues who are spinning words like investment and spending as things other than our kids and their textbooks and their facilities and their teachers. That's what spending is. That's what investment is in the state of California right now. So I just want you to know also that I believe, and I'm unapologetic about this, that this crisis and this moment means that the most vulnerable in our community, children living in poverty, are at the greatest risk right now. And it is really the race and class vulnerabilities around this moment are something that we can't ignore. And every one of us who claims to believe in civil rights and social justice has to stand up now and be counted and get engaged and get involved and call this what it is and not apologize about our willingness to stand up and fight. And in terms of a commitment that I just want to make kind of straight out is I understand that schools are not collections of positions. Schools are communities. They are families. So I personally will not rest until every RIF is rescinded in this district. And similarly, I will not rest until we, and I think everybody on this panel, from what all of our different perspectives agree on this, the achievement gap is the civil rights issue in this community and the city of Los Angeles of our generation. It is our Selma, it is our Birmingham, and we cannot rest, none of us can rest until that shame is eliminated. So I thank you for putting this together.
I want to say thank you to the panels for those fantastic opening remarks. We're going to go ahead and open it up to questions, and we'll start off with our own Babak.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. I appreciate your introductions and contextualizing what you do. I'm going to ask a simple question, but only at the end of a paragraph or two. I'd like to read to provide some context, broad context, in terms of it seems that everyone agrees that something needs to be done, whether it's budgetary, whether it's teachers, students, parents. Nobody's saying everything is fine and dandy. So that's a shared agreement, which is wonderful. However, one of the problems, and my simple question at the end of this is going to be, what would each of you say to a everyday parent? There is maybe a couple of hundred people in here, but there are thousands of families out there who couldn't come here tonight. If there was one thing that you would say to that parent that they need to do, each of you, what's the best advice you could give them? And I'm talking about an everyday parent who's overwhelmed with work, overwhelmed with the pressures of every day, and yet they care about their kids and what's happening to them in the school. But before I do that, I want to explain why I think this is interesting. This was an article in the New York Times last week. It's called The Deadlocked Debate Over Education Reform. It's about New York, but what's fascinating is it seems to apply almost identically to what we're doing here in Mar Vista and Los Angeles. It has to do with the departure of the Chancellor, Kathleen Black. And it says, as is often the case with morally charged policy issues, remember welfare reform? False dichotomies seem to have replaced fruitful conversation. If you support the teachers' union, you don't care about the students. If you're critical of the teachers' union, you don't care about the teachers. If you're in favor of charter schools, you're opposed to public schools. If you believe in increased testing, you're on board with the corruption of our liberal society's most cherished educational values. If you're against increased testing, you're against accountability. It goes on. Neither side seems capable of listening to the other. The data can appear as divided as the rhetoric. New York City Departments of Education will provide you with irrefutable statistics that school reform is working. Opponents of reform will provide you with equally irrefutable statistics that it's not. It can seem equally impossible to disentangle the overlapping factors. Are struggling schools struggling because they've been inundated with students from the failing schools that have closed around them? Are high school graduation rates up because the pressure to raise them has encouraged teachers and principals to pass students who aren't really ready for college? So it's this polarization. And yet we have this shared environment. If I, as a parent myself, and I want to tell you that just a few weeks ago, I was at Hamilton High, where my son is there, goes there, and there was this threat about the, and still exists, about the layoff of the teachers from magnet school, magnet programs, as well as the whole school. And there were 2,500 or more people who went around the school 10 to 12 times in a space of 4 hours. 95% of those 2,500 people were kids. They were students. There were no union people guiding them. There were no teachers except to make sure they were safe. We walked around with them. So the kids are standing up for themselves, which is great. But what would you say to a parent? What can they do if there's one thing? Let's start with James.
I can speak to this as a parent. You have to have your priorities in place. There's nothing more important to me than my daughter. And 74% of this district is Latino. The Latino community needs to be given information so that they can participate in their children's lives, especially at this point in time with the issues that we're facing. Parents need to be involved. And I applaud you for being here. You need to each bring another parent here, and eventually, it starts with one voice, but it grows into millions of voices, and that's where we're at. When Mr. Zimmer brings up civil rights issue of this century, of this time, education is it.
I think one of the most important things I would say to a parent, number one, before I reach out, I would say, you know what? You are important. Every parent has something to offer to every child, to every school, no matter where that school is located. I think what we need to say is that parents, you need to come. If you come too much, so what? You come. And when you come, we give you something to do. And when you come, we make you know that you're there. I think what's happened is a lot of times parents who don't come, sometimes they don't feel welcome to come. And then once they get there, what do we do with them? How do we make them feel? How do we give them that quote, awesome service when they come to us? So I say to the parent, you are important. We need you. You have something to offer. For the mere fact of being a parent, you have that first-time knowledge there that can be helped. I would tell that parent that you are there not just for your child, but for every child in that community. So I say, come. If you cannot get the school painted, parent, you come tell someone that what's going on, and what can we do together? The point is that you come, and the point they know that they are important, and once they get there, you treat them right.
Thank you.
Right?
I don't do well with just one thing, so just to make that clear. I think that the crisis actually, there's a little bit of a silver lining, which I can't even believe that I'm saying this, because this is really the crisis of a generation, really, what's happening in the public schools. But I think that we are in such a tragic state that hopefully it will make people get together and organize. And I think, so the first thing I would say is organize. I think that parents need to work with teachers, with administrators, with school staff, the cafeteria workers, the janitors, the bus drivers, and go to Sacramento. A few things you can do. You can call the 4 legislators who are holding the budget hostage. This is just my own personal opinion, just to make sure it's not a silly idea. But that would be the first step. Maybe let the governor know that you want to have the opportunity to choose what to do about the taxes and extending these taxes on the ballot in June. If we wait until November to solve the budget crisis, the people in this room will see what's going to happen to the schools come August, September. I think that is. I know you're hearing it every day, you're reading in the paper, you'll hear it probably from Steve and others, but we can't afford these cuts. we've already cut $18 billion in the last 3 years from California public schools, and we're about to cut $5 billion. That's $800 per student. That's, in a school of 1,000 students, it's the equivalent of 10 teachers. We can't afford it. So that, I would say the first thing is to organize, and if that doesn't happen, then I think it's great that people want to get engaged on the personal level. I think you need, obviously, parent involvement. You also need parent engagement, which is a little bit different, right? So it's beyond the bake sale, like we say. So, of course, help your kids with homework, but go into the schools, make your voice heard, ask about, look at the budget, talk to teachers, talk to principals. So, I can go on and on, but I think the first thing I would say is sign petitions. I'm sure there are plenty of people in this room who are organizing around budget cuts, and see what you can do at the state level and at the district level. Your budget, the projected budget is available. You can start looking at it, and you can start thinking about, I know that it's not fun when we have to reslice the pie, but what's important to you at your school? What's important to the teachers? What are you willing to sacrifice and not sacrifice? So that's what I would say.
I too have a list of about 20 things, but I will try to respect your question. What do you tell parents that they could do? And I would say if we could just commit as parents to have the maximum attendance possible, I think attendance alone would possibly save almost every teacher. The quid pro quo, attendance for teachers as well. I think we have an attendance problem in general between students and adults in LUSD that is killing the system. If we could kill the attendance problem, we would save every single job. So bring your kids to school, teachers show up for school.
I think it's, if we're going to talk about the social justice of this issue, it's great to say in a room like this, let's organize and send emails and go to Sacramento, and that does not work for most of the parents at my son's school. That's not their reality. And so what we have to do is also, make the case to parents who don't speak the language that we all do, that the school district in general does, that the people in the office do. It's not always a welcome place if you don't, you can be really excluded from the schools, and what we have to do is be able to make the case to those parents that it's worth it, that it's worth trying really hard and being called names or being not liked as well because your students, your children are really important and worth it.
I want to kind of get to the context part of Babak's question, and I actually think that the most important thing, because I think that your question was a little bit about was about families and parents, but also about this divide and these dichotomies, and I think actually the most important word is listen. And I find that when folks listen in the individual interactions and the group interactions, there becomes a arena to really have a conversation that actually transcends languages. Because I mean, not to belittle the point, but this is a multilingual district, and if families, whatever their primary language, are not welcome, and we're not talking to families in their primary language, we can't even have that listening. So that's a basic threshold issue that should be a non-issue for our schools. And beyond the listening, and it really involves reaching inside ourselves, I think, to hear the different stories that are out there, the different experiences, and the common frustrations that kind of extend, transcend a lot of the boundaries that we think are there in our community. When we have the courage to do that, and be authentic about it. We do get to a place of all children. Yes, personally, this is about my child and our family, but this is also about all children, and that we have a kind of sacred obligation as a school community or as a Mar Vista community to every child, whether it's the issue of choice, whether it's the issue of access, whether it's the issue of quality of instruction. And when we're able to have moments where we can bring that conversation to all children, that's when we get to moments of change on the individual teacher-parent level, on the school level, and then eventually in the community level.